After last week's video, where we got the basic screen frame and aluminium channels cut to size, we're ready to take things a step further. This week, we'll make it so that some glass can fit neatly into the frame. To achieve this, we're going to use some rubberized felt channel that looks a bit like this. This material is designed to slot into the U-shaped aluminium window frame, creating a snug and secure fit for the glass. The glass itself will be cut to size later by a specialist windscreen provider to ensure precision. The first job, however, was to remove the existing windscreen frame. This allows us to carefully measure and cut the rubber channel to match exactly. It's super critical that the rubber pieces are cut to the precise length and shape of the ends of each channel. If they don't align perfectly, the frame won't go together properly, and even worse, gaps could allow water to drip through. So accuracy is the key here, both for a clean finish and to keep the windscreen watertight. Now this is actually a slightly nerve-wracking job that sounds simple but could rapidly go wrong. Aluminium is a super soft material, and one slip with the angle grinder could prove to be very damaging, especially as I haven't got any spare channel section to make replacement pieces. The obvious thing would have been to mark the rubber channel and cut it away from the aluminium. The problem is that being rubber, it's kind of floppy and needs a channel section to hold it in place whilst I cut. So there was nothing for it but to be brave and be extremely careful. So after all that, would we be needing to call for a visit from Henry Cavill?
2, 1, shut down.
Nope, got it all done perfectly. On to the next step. Now, this may come as a total surprise to some of you, but when it comes to getting glass cut for a car, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. It's not as simple as popping down to my local double glazing shop and asking them to cut something to size. Car glass is a very specific type of material that's specially made to meet certain safety standards and is also needs to be appropriately marked to comply with the UK's small volume car registration process known as the IVA. This process requires the glass to be toughened or laminated or something and certified to ensure it meets all the necessary legal and safety regulations. So it's not something I can just wing or get done on a whim. After doing a bit of research, it turns out there are only a handful of companies that offer this service. The one name that keeps coming up time and time again is Pilkington. They seem to be the go-to for this sort of thing, so I'm probably going to use them. That said, if anyone out there knows any other companies that can provide car glass for this kind of project, drop their names in the comments below and I'd be more than happy to check them out and give them a shout. Either way, whoever I use is probably going to require a template, so I've decided to create one using 6mm plywood. I'm actually going to cut two separate panels for this and then join them in the middle to ensure that I've definitely got the correct shapes at either end. And it's definitely not because I couldn't get a single piece of wood of the correct length to start with. Definitely not that. Anyway, the first thing that I did was place the wood into the frame and then draw around it to get the correct angles at each end. Next, however, came the first interesting and slightly unexpected challenge. This was how to cut an accurate straight line in the wood. I could have just got out the jigsaw and cut along the line by eye, but for me this always results in a slightly wavy line, and whilst I have got many metalworking tools, I haven't really got that much in the way of woodworking tools, and sadly this means I haven't got a plane. So my solution was to clamp something to the wood and use that as a guide for the jigsaw. So did it work? Nope. For some reason, even though the jigsaw itself followed the line perfectly, the blade had other ideas. It slowly started to bend off to one side or the other, creating its own path, no matter how carefully I tried to guide it. I experimented with different speeds, going super slow, then a bit faster, but it didn't seem to make any difference. The result was always the same, a cut that just wouldn't stay straight. So, with the jigsaw proving unreliable, I decided to bring out the circular saw. Now, I'll be honest, I'm always a little bit apprehensive about using this tool. The blade can be incredibly aggressive, and there's always the risk that instead of giving me a nice clean cut, it'll end up tearing through the wood and leaving me with a bigger mess. But at this point, it was my only realistic option, so I figured it was worth a shot. The big question is, did the circular saw work any better? Yep, that worked just fine. And for all you dear viewers sniggering at me for making such heavy weather with cutting a couple of bits of wood, you've probably got a point. But I'm principally a metal worker, not a woodworker, so this is all kind of new to me, although I am enjoying learning. Anyway, with that process understood, I could then cut the second bit of wood to match for the other side and then start to think about getting everything assembled. The way this all goes together is for the main window frame to come off the car, then the wood or glass slides into the frame, and then the whole thing slots back onto the car so that as the frame moves down towards the body, the wood or glass slides into the channel piece that stays on the car itself. However, whilst I was taking the frame off the car, I had a thought. It's a UK regulation for cars with windscreens to have demist vents, and I haven't got any. Now, on most cars, these vents sit on the top of the dashboard and blow directly onto the screen. The problem is, I don't actually have a top of a dashboard, certainly not one that can hold some vents. So, what to do? So, it's not very often that the genius fairy comes to visit, but in this case, she wandered in and popped an idea into my mental microwave to see if it would go ping. Or, as Baldrick would say,
"Don't worry, Mr. B, I have a cunning plan to solve the problem."
So, my cunning plan is that I notice that the lower part of the windscreen frame is actually a hollow steel tube, 40mm across. But the aluminium frame itself is actually only 20mm across. So I have 20mm of flat surface facing directly perpendicular to the screen. So my genius idea was to cut two narrow slits into this frame, plug the ends, and then add a 40mm steel tube to the underside that I can blow hot air through. Let me play you a montage to show you what I mean. I was really pleased with that idea, can you tell? And the way it turned out. It's a clean, simple solution and it looks great. I'll probably need to spray some anti-rust wax or equivalent treatment into the frame to prevent any damp air that might get blown through from causing rust over time. But it's a small precaution and one that will hopefully keep everything in good shape for years to come. Overall though, I think it's the neatest and most effective way to tackle the problem. With that sorted, I turn my attention back to the process of fitting the windscreen template. And that's when I immediately spotted an issue. Despite using the same wooden template to cut around for both sides, the two pieces had ended up slightly different in height. Not by much, just a couple of millimeters, but it was definitely enough to notice and far too much to ignore. At this point, I did what I probably should have done several hours earlier and went out and bought myself a power plane. I've got to admit, it was a game changer, and in no time at all, the power plane evened everything up perfectly, shaving off those tiny discrepancies and leaving me with two identical pieces. I was ready to move on and start reassembling. It was one of those moments where a little investment in the right tool made all the difference and saved me from what could have been a lot more frustration. As part of the final assembly process, I needed obviously to trim the two bits of wood so they would fit together perfectly, with absolutely no gaps whatsoever between them. This was done by a process of measure, measure, measure again, stand back, look at it, measure again, and then finally, having thought about it for a while, cut, hopefully, just once. So, did it work? No, miles out. And this time, I'm not quite sure where I actually went wrong. Anyway, at that point, I just about had enough of learning woodwork for the day, so I banged it all back on the car and called it good. Somewhere down the line, I'll need to cut a new template, and I guess I'll use that opportunity to cut it from a single piece of wood. Probably again to slightly the wrong size. I'll see you next time, dear viewer.